The cruel whisper of the wind against the thin cabin walls couldn't drown out the sound of Olivia Hayes's sobs as she clutched her stomach, feeling the slight swell beneath her trembling fingers. Standing on the porch of a stranger's homestead, miles from the only home she'd ever known, she wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake in coming here. Lovelock, Nevada, 1885. Olivia shivered as the early spring chill cut through her worn woolen coat. The journey from Virginia City had been grueling 3 days of sitting atop a dusty stagecoach, stomach churning with morning sickness, heart heavy with the memory of her father's final words. "No daughter of mine carries a bastard child," he had spat, throwing her modest possessions into a carpet bag. "You've brought shame to this family for the last time." Her mother had watched silently from the parlor doorway, eyes downcast, as Olivia's younger sisters huddled behind her skirts. Not one of them had spoken in her defense. Not one had bid her goodbye. Now she stood before a weathered cabin nestled at the edge of a sprawling cattle ranch, following the vague directions of a sympathetic woman from the stagecoach. "My cousin's ranch hand might take on extra help," the woman had whispered. "Ask for Griffin Rafferty. He's got a kinder heart than most." Summoning what little courage remained, Olivia knocked on the door. When no answer came, she knocked harder, desperation fueling her actions. She couldn't return to town. Her meager funds barely covered a single night at the boarding house. As tears threatened to fall, the sound of approaching hoofbeats caught her attention. A tall figure on horseback emerged from the golden haze of sunset. Man and beast moved as one across the rugged terrain, silhouetted against the fading daylight. The rider slowed as he approached, pulling his mount to a halt several yards from where she stood. "Can I help you, miss?" His voice carried across the distance between them, deep and cautious. Olivia straightened her back, one hand protectively covering her barely visible condition. "I'm looking for Mr. Griffin Rafferty." The man dismounted with fluid grace that belied his size. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face weathered by sun and wind. Dark hair curled beneath the brim of his Stetson, and piercing green eyes studied her with intensity. "You found him." He approached slowly, as if sensing her nervousness. "What brings a lady to my doorstep at this hour?" Mrs. Fletcher from the stagecoach said you might. Olivia faltered, her rehearsed speech abandoning her. "I need work, sir. I can cook and clean, mend clothing. I'm not afraid of hard labor." Griffin studied her for a long moment. His gaze flickered to where her hand rested against her stomach, then back to her face. "You're in a family way." It wasn't a question. Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks as she nodded, her throat tight with humiliation. "And your husband?" "There is no husband." The words felt like stones in her mouth. "My family has disowned me. I have nowhere to go, Mr. Rafferty." Griffin removed his hat, running a hand through his dark hair as he contemplated her situation. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft nickering of his horse and the distant lowing of cattle. "Come inside," he finally said, moving past her to unlock the door. "Night's coming on fast, and you look dead on your feet." Relief washed over Olivia as she followed him into the cabin. It was simple but tidy, a far cry from her family's comfortable home in Virginia City, but welcoming in its warmth. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, and rustic furniture filled the modest space. "Sit," Griffin instructed, gesturing to a chair at the wooden table before busying himself with starting a fire. "When did you last eat?" "This morning," Olivia admitted, sinking gratefully into the chair. "I saved what I could from yesterday's supper." Griffin's mouth tightened into a hard line as he stoked the kindling. Once the fire caught, he moved to a small pantry, emerging with bread, dried beef, and a jar of preserves. "It's not much," he said, placing the food before her. "But it'll tide you over until I can cook something proper." Olivia stared at the simple offering, then up at the man who provided it. "Why are you helping me?" Griffin's expression softened slightly. "Because someone should." He turned away, filling a kettle with water from a bucket near the door. "Eat. We'll talk after." As Olivia ate, Griffin moved about the cabin with quiet efficiency, preparing a hearty stew and brewing coffee. The simple domesticity of the scene made her throat tighten with emotion. It had been days since anyone had shown her such basic kindness. When her hunger was sated, Griffin sat across from her, cradling a steaming mug between calloused hands. "How far along are you?" he asked without preamble. "Nearly 4 months." Olivia's hands instinctively covered her belly again. "It won't show much for another month or so." "I can still work hard until then." Griffin nodded slowly. "And the father?" Olivia's gaze dropped to the scarred tabletop. "A traveling salesman passing through Virginia City, he promised." She shook her head, unable to finish. "He was gone before I knew about the baby." The cabin fell silent save for the crackling fire and the bubbling stew. Olivia braced herself for judgment, for disgust, for the inevitable moment when this stranger would also turn her away. Instead, Griffin surprised her. "There's a small room off the back. It's not much more than a storage space, but there's room for a bed. You can stay there." Olivia blinked in disbelief. "You'd let me stay, even in my condition?" "Your condition is precisely why you need a safe place," Griffin replied evenly. "I need help around here and you need somewhere to be. Seems like a fair arrangement to me." "People will talk," Olivia warned. "They'll think the worst." A ghost of a smile crossed Griffin's face. "Let them. I stopped caring about town gossip long ago." He rose to check on the stew, then returned with a steaming bowl. As he placed it before her, his expression grew serious. "There's one thing you should understand, Miss Hayes. If you stay here, that child you're carrying," his gaze dropped briefly to her stomach, "that baby will have a home. A proper home. Far as anyone needs to know, that baby is mine." Olivia's spoon clattered against the bowl. "Mr. Rafferty, I couldn't possibly—" "Your baby is my baby," he stated firmly. "That's what we'll tell folks. It's the only way to spare you both from judgment." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Griffin's expression remained unreadable as he returned to his seat. "Because I know what it's like to be alone in this world." He took a sip of coffee before continuing. "Rest tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out the details." Olivia nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. As she ate the hearty stew, warmth spread through her body for the first time in days. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but tonight she had food, shelter, and an unexpected ally in this rugged cowboy with the kind eyes. Dawn broke over the eastern hills, filtering golden light through the small window of Olivia's new room. She woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until the events of the previous day came rushing back. The rejection from her family, the desperate journey, and the unexpected kindness of Griffin Rafferty. She dressed quickly in her second-best dress, one of only 3 she'd managed to pack, before being thrown out, and attempted to tame her copper hair into a presentable bun. The small mirror hanging on the wall reflected a face still young at 20 years, but with shadows beneath blue eyes that hadn't been there months before. When she emerged into the main room, she found Griffin already dressed and setting out a simple breakfast of biscuits, eggs, and coffee. "Good morning," he greeted, glancing up from his task. "Slept well, better than I have in weeks," Olivia admitted. "Thank you again for your kindness, Mr. Rafferty." "Griffin," he corrected. "If we're to convince folks we're together, you should use my given name." Olivia nodded, heat rising to her cheeks at the implication. "Of course, and I'm Olivia." They ate breakfast as Griffin outlined her duties: cooking, cleaning, tending the small kitchen garden, and handling the household accounts. "I'm not much for bookkeeping," he explained. "Figure your education might serve us well there." "How did you know I was educated?" Olivia asked, surprised. Griffin's mouth curved in a slight smile. "Your speech, the way you hold yourself. You're no ranch girl." "No," she agreed. "My father was a bank manager. He insisted all his daughters receive proper schooling." A shadow crossed Griffin's face. "Proper enough to teach, but not enough mercy to help his own when in need." Olivia had no response to that bitter truth. After breakfast, Griffin showed her around the property, a modest but well-maintained ranch with a small herd of cattle, 2 working horses, a milk cow, chickens, and a sprawling garden plot waiting for spring planting. "It's not much compared to some spreads," Griffin said as they walked the perimeter, "but it's mine, free and clear. No debts." "It's wonderful," Olivia replied honestly. After the uncertainty of recent days, the simple security of the ranch felt like an unimaginable luxury. As they approached the barn, Griffin hesitated. "There's something else you should know before we continue this arrangement." Olivia's heart sank. There would be conditions after all. "I don't expect anything improper," he said carefully, his eyes fixed on the distant mountains. "The room is yours, your virtue intact. Our arrangement is practical, nothing more." Relief washed over Olivia. "I never thought otherwise." Griffin nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Good. Now I need to check the north pasture. The house is yours to explore. We'll ride into town tomorrow for supplies and to introduce you." The implications of that introduction hung between them, the lies they would tell, the judgment they would face. But Olivia found herself nodding in agreement. What choice did she have? As Griffin rode off, Olivia turned to the cabin with renewed purpose. If this was to be her home, she would make it worthy of the man who had offered her shelter when no one else would. She spent the day cleaning every corner of the modest dwelling, discovering that beneath a layer of bachelor neglect lay a well-built home with thoughtful touches, bookshelves filled with volumes ranging from practical ranching guides to poetry, a rocking chair positioned perfectly by the fireplace, curtains faded but of good quality. In a trunk beneath Griffin's bed, which she discovered while changing linens, she found a small collection of items that gave her pause: a woman's silver hairbrush, a faded daguerreotype of a smiling young couple, and a tiny knitted baby booty. She closed the trunk quickly, feeling like an intruder on private grief. By late afternoon, Olivia had transformed the cabin. Fresh, scented linens adorned the beds, surfaces gleamed with polish, and a stew simmered on the stove, filling the air with savory aromas. When Griffin returned at dusk, he paused in the doorway, taking in the changes with visible surprise. "You've been busy," he remarked, hanging his hat on a peg by the door. "I hope you don't mind," Olivia said, suddenly uncertain. "I wanted to earn my keep." Griffin's expression softened as he moved further into the room, breathing in the smells of home cooking. "No complaints from me," he gestured to the stew. "Smells like my mother's cooking." Olivia smiled, pleased by the comparison. "High praise indeed. It's ready whenever you are." They ate together at the table, the silence between them gradually easing into comfortable conversation. Griffin spoke of the ranch, his plans for increasing the herd, the challenges of the coming spring season. Olivia shared stories of her sisters, her education, her love of books, carefully avoiding mentions of the recent painful past. As night fell and the lamps were lit, Griffin cleared his throat. "About tomorrow." Olivia tensed, setting aside her mending. "Yes. We should have our story straight," he said. "For the townsfolk." Olivia nodded. They needed a convincing tale to explain her presence and condition. "What did you have in mind?" The simplest lies are easiest to maintain, Griffin reasoned. We could say we met last fall when I traveled to Virginia City for supplies. A whirlwind courtship, letters exchanged over winter, and a hasty marriage when we discovered I was expecting, Olivia finished. But shouldn't we have rings? Documents? Griffin rose and disappeared into his bedroom, returning moments later with a small wooden box. Inside lay a simple gold band. It was my mother's, he explained, his voice tight with some unspoken emotion. You can wear it for appearances. Olivia stared at the ring, understanding the significance of such an offer. I couldn't possibly. It's gathering dust otherwise, Griffin interrupted. As for documents, folks around here don't ask for proof. Your word, our word will be enough. Reluctantly, Olivia took the ring, sliding it onto her finger. It fit surprisingly well, the weight of it foreign but not unpleasant. What about your past? Won't people question why they've never heard of a wife before? I keep to myself, Griffin replied with a shrug. Most folks in Lovelock know me only as the quiet rancher who brings cattle to market twice a year, those who know me better. His expression darkened slightly. Well, they know I've had my share of loss. They'll likely be glad to see me settled. As they continued refining their fabricated history, Olivia found herself wondering about the real history of the man across from her. Who was the woman in the daguerreotype? What sorrows had shaped the lines around his eyes? But those were questions for another time. Tonight, they were creating a new history, a false one, yes, but one that offered her child a future free from shame. Morning brought a clear sky and brisk wind as Griffin harnessed the wagon for their journey to Lovelock. Olivia emerged from the cabin wearing her best dress, a modest blue cotton that did little to disguise her condition from those who knew to look. You look nice, Griffin commented as he helped her onto the wagon seat. It wasn't effusive praise, but the simple sincerity in his voice brought color to Olivia's cheeks. Thank you, she replied, smoothing her skirts nervously. I'm rather anxious about today. Griffin settled beside her, taking up the reins. Just remember, you've done nothing wrong. His voice was firm. Hold your head high. The journey to Lovelock took nearly an hour over rutted roads, giving Olivia time to rehearse their story and steel her nerves. As they crested the final hill, the town spread before them, modest but thriving, with a main street lined by storefronts, a church steeple rising above the buildings, and scattered homesteads dotting the surrounding area. Griffin guided the wagon down the hill, nodding to farmers and ranchers they passed. When they reached the main street, he pulled up before the general store. Ready? He asked, offering his hand to help her down. Olivia took a deep breath and accepted his assistance, acutely aware of curious eyes already turning their way. As ready as I'll ever be. The bell above the store's door announced their arrival, drawing the attention of the proprietor and the few customers browsing the shelves. Griffin kept his hand at the small of Olivia's back, a gesture both protective and possessive. Griffin Rafferty, the store owner, a portly man with mutton chop whiskers, hurried forward. Didn't expect to see you before spring roundup. Special occasion, Henry, Griffin replied, his usual taciturn manner softening slightly. I'd like you to meet my wife, Olivia. A stunned silence fell over the store. Henry's eyes widened comically as he looked from Griffin to Olivia and back again. Wife, he finally sputtered. When did this happen? Last fall, Griffin explained smoothly. We met during my trip to Virginia City. Olivia extended her hand, the borrowed ring glinting in the sunlight streaming through the windows. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Henry Mills, the shopkeeper replied automatically, taking her hand. His gaze dropped briefly to her midsection before returning to her face with renewed understanding. Well, this is a surprise. Congratulations to you both." Word spread through the store like wildfire, customers abandoning their shopping to circle around the newlyweds. Olivia maintained a smile despite the scrutiny, grateful for Griffin's steady presence beside her. "My stars, Griffin Rafferty with a wife!" exclaimed an elderly woman, adjusting her spectacles as if Olivia might be a mirage. "And such a pretty one, too." "Thank you, madam," Olivia replied, falling back on her Virginia City manners. "When's the little one due?" asked another woman, her direct question causing Olivia's cheeks to flame. "Early summer," Griffin answered before Olivia could respond, his tone discouraging further inquiry. They proceeded with their shopping, Griffin adding items to their list that Olivia hadn't considered: fabric for new curtains and clothing, a rocking chair suitable for nursing, books on infant care. His thoughtfulness touched her deeply. As Griffin settled the bill, the store's door opened to admit a striking woman in an expensive riding habit. The atmosphere in the store shifted immediately, conversations dying as the newcomer surveyed the scene with sharp eyes. "Griffin," she greeted, her voice carrying a note of surprise. "I heard you were in town with company." Griffin straightened, his expression carefully neutral. "Verity, good to see you." Olivia felt the woman's calculating gaze sweep over her, lingering on her wedding ring and the slight swell of her abdomen. "Aren't you going to introduce us?" Verity prompted, a brittle smile curving her painted lips. Griffin cleared his throat. "Verity Winchester, this is my wife, Olivia." "Olivia, Verity's father owns the Winchester Ranch east of town." "Your wife," Verity repeated, disbelief coloring her tone. "How unexpected." "Life is full of surprises," Griffin replied evenly. Verity's smile didn't reach her eyes as she addressed Olivia. "Indeed it is." "Welcome to Lovelock, Mrs. Rafferty. I'm sure you'll find our little community accommodating." The threat beneath the polite words was unmistakable. Olivia lifted her chin slightly. "Thank you, Miss Winchester. Everyone has been most welcoming so far." Tension crackled between the women until Griffin intervened. "We should be going. Supplies to deliver and Olivia needs her rest." As they left the store, Olivia waited until they were loading the wagon before asking, "Who was that woman?" Griffin's jaw tightened as he secured a crate. "Verity Winchester. Her father owns half the water rights in the county." "That's not what I meant," Olivia pressed gently. Griffin paused, his hands resting on the wagon's edge. "She had expectations. I never encouraged them." The simple explanation revealed volumes. Olivia nodded, understanding the additional complications their charade might create. As they prepared to depart, a young woman hurried across the street toward them, her friendly face a welcome contrast to Verity's cold scrutiny. "Griffin Rafferty," she called. "Henry just told me the news." Griffin's expression warmed. "Hannah, good to see you." The young woman reached them, slightly breathless. "Is it true? You've married?" "It is," Griffin confirmed, helping Olivia up to the wagon seat. "Hannah Cooper, meet my wife, Olivia. Hannah runs the town's schoolhouse." "How wonderful to meet you," Hannah said sincerely, offering her hand to Olivia. "Griffin's spoken of you before, though he kept your courtship mighty quiet." Olivia blinked in surprise, glancing at Griffin. He gave a nearly imperceptible nod, encouraging her to play along. "He's a private man," Olivia replied with a genuine smile, liking Hannah immediately. "But I've heard about your schoolhouse. It sounds lovely." "You must come visit," Hannah insisted. "And when the little one arrives, yes, Henry mentioned that too, we'd love to have you join our Ladies' Aid Society." The kindness in the offer brought tears to Olivia's eyes. "Thank you. I'd like that very much." As they drove away from town, Olivia's emotions warred within her gratitude for Hannah's warm welcome anxiety over Verity's obvious resentment, and growing unease about the web of deception they were weaving. "You handled that well," Griffin commented as the town receded behind them. "Did I?" Olivia sighed, unconsciously twisting the borrowed ring. "I feel terrible lying to these people, especially someone as kind as Hannah." Griffin's expression grew somber. "Sometimes a kind lie is better than a cruel truth." The wisdom in his words settled over Olivia as they continued their journey home. For better or worse, she was now Olivia Rafferty, wife of the quiet rancher with the green eyes and guarded heart. Spring unfurled across the Nevada landscape in a brief but glorious transformation. The hills surrounding the ranch bloomed with wildflowers, and Olivia's garden thrived under her careful tending. As April yielded to May, her body changed to her slender frame now unmistakably rounded with the growing life within. Life with Griffin settled into an unexpectedly comfortable rhythm. He rose before dawn to tend the cattle, returning mid-morning for a substantial breakfast. Olivia managed the household, gradually adding her own touches to the cabin, fresh curtains sewn from the fabric purchased in town, wildflowers arranged in mason jars, and shelves reorganized to accommodate her own small collection of books. In the evenings, they often sat before the fire, Griffin whittling or repairing tack, while Olivia sewed baby clothes from soft flannel. Their conversations, initially stilted and cautious, grew more natural with each passing day. Griffin shared stories of his early days ranching, of cattle drives and the changing West. Olivia spoke of books she'd read, recited poetry from memory, and occasionally played simple melodies on the battered piano Griffin had hauled from a neighboring ranch at her delighted discovery of the instrument during a visit. They were building something that resembled a real marriage in all ways but one. Griffin maintained his promise of propriety, sleeping in his room while Olivia occupied hers. Yet Olivia couldn't deny the growing warmth she felt in his presence, a fluttering that had nothing to do with the baby's movements. True to her word, Hannah Cooper had welcomed Olivia into Lovelock's small circle of women. Twice monthly, Olivia joined the Ladies' Aid Society at the church, sewing quilts for the needy and assisting with planning community events. Through these gatherings, she forged tentative friendships, particularly with Hannah and with Mary Donovan, the town doctor's wife. Not everyone was welcoming, of course. Verity Winchester and her circle regarded Olivia with thinly veiled suspicion, whispering behind fans when she entered the mercantile or passed on the street. Olivia bore their scrutiny with dignity, reminding herself that their judgment was nothing compared to her family's rejection. It was during one particularly warm afternoon in late May when the fragile piece of her new life faced its first real test. Griffin had ridden out at dawn to check on a break in the fence line, leaving Olivia to her baking. The sound of approaching hoofbeats drew her attention from the bread dough she was kneading. Wiping flour from her hands, she moved to the window, expecting to see Griffin returning early. Instead, a smart buggy pulled by two matching bay horses rolled into the yard. Verity Winchester, dressed impeccably in a fashionable riding outfit, handled the reins with confident precision. Olivia's stomach clenched with apprehension as she smoothed her apron and hair before stepping onto the porch. "Miss Winchester," she greeted evenly. "What a surprise!" Verity's smile was sharp as she secured the reins. "Mrs. Rafferty, I was passing by and thought I'd pay a neighborly call." The lie was transparent. The Winchester ranch lay in the opposite direction from town. "How thoughtful," Olivia replied, maintaining her composure. "Won't you come in? I've just put coffee on." The interior of the cabin, once bachelor sparse, now reflected Olivia's presence, clean, orderly, with feminine touches that softened the rustic space. Verity's gaze swept the room, noting the changes with a slight narrowing of her eyes. "You've certainly made yourself at home," she observed, removing her gloves as she settled at the table. Olivia poured coffee into her best cups, a wedding gift from Mary Donovan. "That's what wives do, isn't it?" Verity's laugh held no warmth. "Of course. It's just surprising how quickly Griffin embraced married life. He was always so independent, resistant to entanglements." Olivia set the coffee before her unwelcome guest, choosing her words carefully. "People change when they find the right person. Indeed." Verity sipped her coffee, studying Olivia over the rim of her cup. "And you two found each other so fortuitously. Just in time, it seems." The implication hung in the air, unmistakable. Olivia's hand moved protectively to her swollen abdomen. "God's timing is perfect," she responded, drawing on her church upbringing for a suitably pious answer. "So they say." Verity set down her cup with deliberate care. "Though it's curious how no one in town received an invitation to this whirlwind wedding. Or how Griffin never once mentioned a sweetheart during his frequent business dealings with my father last fall." Olivia maintained her smile, though her heart raced. "As I'm sure you've noticed, my husband is a private man." "Private, yes." Verity leaned forward slightly. "But not secretive." "Not until now." Before Olivia could respond, the door opened and Griffin strode in, his expression darkening as he took in the scene before him. "Verity," he acknowledged, removing his hat. "What brings you here?" "Just welcoming your bride properly," Verity replied, rising gracefully. "We didn't get much chance to talk in town." Griffin moved to stand beside Olivia, his hand coming to rest at the small of her back. The gesture was possessive, protective. "That's mighty thoughtful of you. I was just telling Olivia how surprised everyone was by your marriage. So sudden, after years of turning down every eligible lady in the county." Verity's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Including me." The tension in the room thickened. Griffin's voice remained steady, though Olivia felt his hand tense against her back. "I never made you any promises, Verity." "No," she agreed, reaching for her gloves. "You didn't. But my father made certain assumptions when you approached him about purchasing additional water rights, assumptions about business and family alliances." Griffin's expression hardened. "Your father should know better than to confuse business with personal matters." Verity pulled on her gloves with deliberate slowness. "He's a practical man, as are you, Griffin, or so I thought." Her gaze slid to Olivia's rounded middle. "Though perhaps more practical than I realized." Olivia felt the color drain from her face at the insinuation. Griffin stepped forward, placing himself between the women. "I think it's time you left," he said quietly, his tone leaving no room for argument. Verity inclined her head in mock deference. "Of course. I've taken up enough of your time." At the door, she paused. "Oh, and Olivia, do be careful with the spring water. Several expectant mothers have fallen ill this season. Something in the groundwater, they say." With that parting threat, she swept out the door, leaving a chill in her wake despite the warm afternoon. As the sound of the buggy faded, Olivia sank onto a chair, her hands trembling. "She knows." Griffin knelt before her, taking her shaking hands in his calloused ones. "She suspects, but she can't prove anything." "Does it matter?" Olivia's voice cracked with emotion. "If she spreads rumors, let her," Griffin interrupted firmly. "Verity Winchester isn't the arbiter of truth in Lovelock." Olivia looked into his eyes, seeing the determined set of his jaw. "Why is she so vindictive? Because you rejected her." Griffin sighed, releasing Olivia's hands to run his own through his hair. "Partly, but it's more about control. The Winchesters have owned this valley for 3 generations. They're not accustomed to being denied." "And you denied them." What exactly? Olivia asked, sensing there was more to the story. Griffin rose, moving to pour himself coffee before answering. Winchester wants my land. Has for years. The creek that runs through my property feeds into his grazing lands downstream. If he controlled it, he could control who has access to water, Olivia finished, understanding dawning. And that's power in Nevada. Griffin nodded grimly. He's been trying to buy me out since my father died. When that failed, he tried to marry me in. And now I've ruined that plan, Olivia said softly. Griffin turned to face her, his expression softening. You've done nothing wrong, Olivia. This feud was brewing long before you arrived. The sincerity in his voice eased some of her anxiety, but Verity's parting words echoed ominously in her mind. Should we be worried? About the water? Griffin's jaw tightened. I'll have it tested. But the creek comes from mountain springs on federal land. Winchester can't easily tamper with it. He crossed to her again, surprising her by gently touching her cheek. Don't fret. I won't let anything happen to you or the baby. The tenderness in his touch and the fierce protectiveness in his voice stirred something deep within Olivia. For the first time since discovering her pregnancy, she felt truly safe. In that moment, their pretend marriage felt more real than any truth she'd known before. The following weeks brought subtle changes to their relationship. Griffin's protectiveness manifested in 100 small ways, accompanying Olivia to town for ladies' aid meetings, adding iron bars to the cabin windows, testing the creek water weekly, and always returning before dusk, regardless of unfinished ranch work. Olivia found herself watching for him each evening, her heart lightening at the sight of his tall figure crossing the yard. Their evening conversations lengthened, growing more personal as mutual trust deepened. On a particularly balmy June evening, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and crimson. Olivia's knitting needles clicked rhythmically as she worked on a small blanket, while Griffin smoked his pipe, the sweet scent of tobacco mingling with the sage-scented breeze. I never thanked you properly, Olivia said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. Griffin raised an eyebrow. For what? For everything. She set aside her knitting, one hand resting on her now prominent belly. For taking me in when you had no obligation. For giving my child your name. For treating me with dignity when my own family could not. Griffin tapped his pipe against the porch rail, considering his response. Anyone would have done the same. Olivia shook her head. No, Griffin, they wouldn't have. She hesitated before continuing. I've been wondering. Why did you help me that day? The truth, please. Griffin's gaze fixed on the distant horizon. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, weighted with memory. You reminded me of someone. Understanding dawned as Olivia recalled the items in the trunk: the silver brush, the daguerreotype, the tiny booty. Your wife, a sad smile touched his lips. Clara, we were married 5 years ago. He drew a deep breath. She died in childbed along with our son. I couldn't save either of them. Olivia's heart ached for his loss. I'm so sorry, Griffin, he nodded, acknowledging her sympathy. After I swore I'd never marry again, never risk that pain, but when you arrived, he gestured helplessly. I couldn't turn you away, not when I could offer protection at least. It must be difficult, Olivia said softly, having me here in this condition, a constant reminder. Griffin turned to her, his expression earnest. Not in the way you think. It's been healing in a way, bringing life back to this place. His admission touched her deeply. Impulsively, Olivia reached for his hand. Would you like to feel the baby? He's quite active this evening. Griffin hesitated, surprise evident in his features. Then, with cautious movements, he placed his large hand where she indicated. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a distinct kick pressed against his palm. Griffin's eyes widened in wonder. "That's quite a strong little cowboy you've got there," he murmured, his hand lingering longer than necessary. "Or cowgirl," Olivia corrected with a smile. "I haven't decided yet." Griffin chuckled, the sound warming Olivia more than the evening air. "Either way, that child will be loved." The simple declaration, spoken without pretense, brought tears to Olivia's eyes. In that moment, looking at Griffin's face illuminated by the fading sunset, she knew her feelings for him had transformed into something far deeper than gratitude. The summer heat intensified as July arrived, bringing with it the heaviness of Olivia's advancing pregnancy. The baby was due any day, according to Mary Donovan's calculations during her weekly visits to check on Olivia's progress. "Everything looks perfect," Mary assured her during one such examination. "The baby's positioned well, and you're strong and healthy. When the time comes, send Griffin for me immediately, day or night." Olivia nodded gratefully, adjusting her dress over her enormous belly. "I can't thank you enough for your care, Mary." The doctor's wife patted her hand. "It's what neighbors do." She hesitated before adding, "Though I must say, I've never seen such devotion from a husband as Griffin shows. He practically interrogated Jonathan about every possible birthing complication." Heat that had nothing to do with the summer day crept up Olivia's neck. "He's been very supportive." Mary's knowing smile suggested she sensed more than Olivia was saying. "It's not just duty, you know. I've known Griffin Rafferty for 5 years, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you." Before Olivia could respond, the cabin door opened and Griffin entered, hat in hand. "How are our patients?" he asked, his eyes immediately seeking Olivia's. "Thriving," Mary replied, gathering her things. "The baby's strong and Olivia's in excellent health. Couldn't ask for better." Relief visibly washed over Griffin's features. "Good, that's good." He turned to Mary. "I'll walk you to your buggy." When he returned, Olivia was attempting to reach a jar on a high shelf, her extended belly making the task impossible. "Let me," Griffin said, easily retrieving the preserves she wanted. "Thank you," Olivia sighed, settling into a chair. "I feel utterly useless these days. I can barely reach the stove, let alone tend the garden properly." Griffin set about preparing tea, a task he'd taken to lately as Olivia's mobility decreased. "You're growing a human being. I'd say that's far from useless." His matter-of-fact support brought a smile to her lips. "Still, I hate being a burden." Griffin placed a steaming cup before her, his expression serious. "You're not a burden, Olivia, not to me." He hesitated before continuing. "In fact, these past months have been the happiest I've known in years." The admission hung between them, freighted with unspoken meaning. Olivia's heart quickened. Even with all the complications, Verity's hostility, the town gossip, my condition, even so. Griffin pulled up a chair, sitting close enough that their knees almost touched. "I've been thinking about the future, after the baby comes." Olivia tensed slightly. Would he expect her to leave once her usefulness as a housekeeper diminished? "Oh," Griffin seemed to sense her anxiety. "I want you to stay, Olivia, both of you." He cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with emotional declarations. "This arrangement we have, it's been good, hasn't it?" "Very good," Olivia agreed softly. "Then perhaps." Griffin stared into his tea as if seeking courage. "Perhaps we could make it real." Olivia's breath caught. "Real." Griffin finally met her gaze, his green eyes intense with emotion. "I care for you, Olivia, more than I thought possible after Clara. If you could consider, in time, making this marriage more than just a convenient fiction." A sharp pain interrupted his proposal, causing Olivia to gasp and clutch her abdomen. Griffin was immediately on his feet, alarm replacing vulnerability. "What is it?" "The baby." Olivia nodded, another pain seizing her moments later. "I think so. But it's too soon." Mary just left. Griffin was already moving, gathering the birthing supplies Mary had left prepared. "Babies have their own schedules," he said with forced calm. "I'll fetch Mary. Can you manage until then?" Olivia nodded through the receding pain, knowing she had little choice. Griffin pressed a quick kiss to her forehead there first, before rushing out the door. The hours that followed blurred into a haze of pain and exhaustion for Olivia. Mary arrived promptly, bringing calm efficiency to the birthing room. Griffin was banished to the porch, where he paced relentlessly, his prayers mingling with the evening chorus of crickets. As midnight approached, the distinctive cry of a newborn pierced the night air. Inside the cabin, Mary wrapped a squirming infant in the blanket Olivia had knitted. "You have a son," she announced, placing the tiny bundle in Olivia's arms. "A perfect, healthy boy." Tears of joy streamed down Olivia's face as she gazed at her child. He had a shock of dark hair and a determined little chin that reminded her of someone. "Griffin," she whispered to Mary. "Please let Griffin come in." Mary opened the door, beckoning to the anxious man outside. Griffin entered cautiously, his face drawn with worry until he saw Olivia smiling through her tears, their child cradled against her breast. "Come meet your son," she invited, her voice tremulous with emotion. Griffin approached slowly, as if walking in a dream. When he reached the bedside, he knelt, bringing himself level with Olivia and the baby. With reverent fingers, he touched the infant's cheek. "He's perfect," he whispered, "just like his mother." Olivia's heart swelled with love for her child and for the man who had given them both a home and a future. "I never answered your question," she said softly. Griffin looked up, confusion momentarily clouding his features. "About making this marriage real," Olivia clarified. "The answer is yes, Griffin. It's been real to me for some time now." Joy transformed Griffin's weathered face. With gentle care, he leaned forward, pressing his lips to hers in a tender kiss that promised a lifetime of devotion. Mary discreetly busied herself across the room, giving the new family a moment of privacy. "Have you thought of a name?" she asked eventually. Olivia looked to Griffin questioningly. He smiled, stroking the baby's dark hair. "What about Samuel?" he suggested. "After my father." "Samuel Rafferty." Olivia tested the name, smiling when the baby seemed to respond with a tiny sigh. "It's perfect." As dawn broke over the Nevada mountains, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, the little family slept peacefully. Olivia and Samuel in the bed, Griffin in the chair beside them, his large hand protectively covering both his wife and child. The challenges ahead: Verity's continued hostility, the legal complications of their unusual union, the difficulties of raising a child on a remote ranch seemed small compared to the miracle they had already accomplished. A family forged not from obligation or convention, but from kindness, courage, and growing love. In the soft light of morning, Olivia stirred to find Griffin watching her, his expression tender and wondering. "No regrets?" she asked softly. Griffin shook his head, reaching to brush a copper strand from her forehead. "Not one. Your baby is my baby," he repeated his promise from months ago. "And you, Olivia Hayes Rafferty, are my heart." In that moment, with her son sleeping peacefully and her husband's love shining in his eyes, Olivia knew she had found her true home at last. The weeks following Samuel's birth passed in a blur of sleepless nights, joyful discoveries, and deepening bonds. Griffin proved himself an attentive father, often taking the fussing infant in the early morning hours, so Olivia could catch a few hours of much-needed sleep. She would wake to find them on the porch rocker, Griffin pointing out cattle in the distant pasture or naming birds as they soared overhead, his deep voice a soothing rumble against the baby's ear. By late August, they had settled into a new routine. Samuel thrived under their care, his initial tiny form filling out with healthy plumpness. Olivia regained her strength, resuming household duties while adapting to motherhood. Griffin divided his time between ranch work and family, often bringing Samuel with him for brief excursions around the property in a sling Mary had fashioned. One particularly memorable afternoon, Griffin returned from town with the buggy loaded with unexpected supplies, lumber, tools, paint, and finer furnishings than they could typically afford. "What's all this?" Olivia asked, bouncing Samuel on her hip as she surveyed the bounty. Griffin unloaded a polished wooden cradle, crafted with obvious skill. "I thought it was time Samuel had a proper bed, instead of that dresser drawer we've been using." Olivia ran her hand over the smooth wood, noting the intricate carvings of stars and moons along the headboard. "It's beautiful, Griffin. Did you commission it from the carpenter in town?" "Made it myself," he admitted, a hint of pride in his voice. "Been working on it during the evenings in the barn." Tears pricked Olivia's eyes at this tangible evidence of his devotion. "It's perfect." "But what about the rest? That's enough lumber for a significant project." Griffin hesitated before answering. "I thought we might add on to the cabin. A proper bedroom for Samuel as he grows, maybe a sitting room for you." The consideration behind his planning touched Olivia deeply. This was not a man making temporary arrangements, but one building for a future together. "Our first real home improvement as a true family," she said softly, leaning against his arm. "I think it's a wonderful idea." Griffin's arm circled her waist, drawing her and Samuel against his side. "I want to do right by you both, give you the home you deserve." The September days grew shorter as Griffin worked on the cabin addition, often joined by neighboring ranchers who arrived unannounced with tools and supplies. The community's acceptance of their little family, despite the unusual circumstances of its formation, manifested in these acts of neighborly support. Even so, Verity Winchester's shadow occasionally darkened their happiness. Reports reached them of her continued insinuations about the hasty marriage and the baby's paternity. Twice, Griffin encountered unexpected difficulties with cattle buyers who suddenly withdrew fair offers after mysterious meetings with Winchester representatives. "He's trying to starve us out," Griffin confided one evening after a particularly frustrating day at the cattle auction. "3 buyers backed out today. Without those sales, winter will be lean." Olivia's mind raced with possible solutions. "Could we sell elsewhere? Carson City, perhaps?" Griffin shook his head. "Transportation costs would eat any profit, and Winchester has connections there too." "What about my skills? I could offer piano lessons to children in town or perhaps tutoring." "No." Griffin's response was immediate and firm. "I won't have you working while caring for Samuel. We'll manage." Though she understood his pride, Olivia couldn't help feeling frustrated by her inability to contribute financially. That night, as she nursed Samuel in the quiet darkness, an idea began to form, one that might solve their problems without challenging Griffin's sense of responsibility. The next morning, after Griffin left to continue work on the new room's framework, Olivia bundled Samuel into the sling and walked the mile to Hannah Cooper's small house near the schoolhouse. The young teacher welcomed them warmly, cooing over Samuel's growth before settling Olivia with tea. "This is more than a social call, isn't it?" Hannah observed astutely. "Something's troubling you." Olivia nodded, gathering her courage. "I need advice, Hannah, and perhaps your help." Over the next hour, Olivia outlined the Winchesters' economic campaign against them and her idea to counter it. Hannah listened intently, her practical teacher's mind evaluating each aspect of the plan. "It could work," she admitted when Olivia finished. "The timing is certainly right with harvest approaching, but what will Griffin say? He strikes me as traditional regarding a wife's role." Olivia sighed, shifting Samuel to her other arm. "I'm hoping he'll see the necessity. We can't let the Winchesters force us off our land through financial attrition." "Well, if anyone can convince that stubborn man, it's you," Hannah said with a smile. "I'll speak with Mary Donovan and Sarah Jenkins. Between us, we can arrange everything on the town side." That evening, after Samuel was settled in his new cradle, Olivia broached the subject with Griffin. As expected, his initial reaction was resistance. "Absolutely not," he said firmly, setting down the ledger book he'd been frowning over. "It's my responsibility to provide." "And you do," Olivia assured him, sitting beside him at the table. "But this is about more than pride, Griffin. It's about securing our future, Samuel's future." Griffin's jaw tightened. "The Winchesters won't break us." "No, they won't," Olivia agreed, placing her hand over his, "because we won't let them. But fighting them requires resources." She outlined her plan again, establishing a small bakery stall at the town's weekly market, leveraging her considerable skills in the kitchen to generate income while raising awareness of the Winchesters' tactics. "Hannah, Mary, and Sarah have already offered to help with setup and minding Samuel during market days," she explained. "And Mary says Dr. Donovan has been wanting to speak with you about the water rights issue. Apparently, he's had concerns about Winchester's expansion plans for some time." Griffin listened silently, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he rose and walked to the window, staring out at the darkening yard. Olivia waited, giving him space to process. Finally, he turned. "You've thought this through?" It wasn't a question, but Olivia nodded anyway. "I have." A reluctant smile tugged at his lips. "You're remarkable, you know that. Most women would have fled back east at the first sign of trouble." "I'm not most women," Olivia reminded him, "and I have more at stake than most. This is our home, Griffin. I'll fight for it too." Griffin crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. "Our home," he repeated, before lowering his mouth to hers in a kiss that spoke volumes about his growing feelings. When they parted, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "All right, Mrs. Rafferty. We'll try your plan. But at the first sign that it's too much strain on you or Samuel, we'll reassess," Olivia agreed, joy bubbling within her at this victory. "Thank you for trusting me." Griffin's hands framed her face, his expression earnest. "I do trust you, Olivia. More than I've trusted anyone in a very long time." The market debut of Rafferty's Home Baking in early October exceeded even Olivia's optimistic expectations. Her bread, pies, and cakes made with recipes handed down through generations of Hayes women sold out within hours. The following week, customers lined up before she even finished setting up her modest stall. With Hannah's help managing the stall and Mary often watching Samuel, Olivia's business flourished. The additional income, while modest, helped offset the losses from Winchester's interference with cattle sales. More importantly, the townspeople's support demonstrated a shifting of allegiances that clearly rankled Randall Winchester and his daughter. By late November, the cabin addition was complete, a spacious bedroom for Samuel, connected to a small sitting room where Olivia could entertain the growing number of friends who visited regularly. Griffin had crafted simple but beautiful furniture for each space, including a writing desk placed near the sitting room window where Olivia could view the mountains, while corresponding with the new contacts she'd made through her business. As the first snow dusted the mountains, Griffin received an unexpected visitor, Jonathan Donovan, the town's doctor and husband to Mary. Griffin, the doctor greeted, dismounting from his horse with stiff movements that suggested a long ride. Got time for a conversation? Griffin nodded, gesturing toward the barn where they could speak privately. Olivia watched from the window, Samuel asleep against her shoulder, curious about this unusual midweek visit. When Griffin returned an hour later, his expression was thoughtful but determined. What did Dr. Donovan want? Olivia asked, setting aside her mending. Griffin removed his coat, hanging it carefully before answering. He came with a proposition. Several ranchers and townspeople are forming a water cooperative, a legal entity to challenge Winchester's control of the regional water supply. Olivia's eyes widened. And they want your involvement. They want my land, or rather, access to the creek that runs through it. Griffin sat beside her on the sofa, his expression serious. If enough landowners join, we could establish fair water rights for everyone in the valley. That sounds like a worthwhile cause, Olivia observed. What's troubling you about it? Griffin's hand sought hers, fingers intertwining naturally. Winchester won't take this challenge lightly. He's already making things difficult for us. This would be a direct confrontation. Olivia understood his hesitation. With a young family to protect, such a battle carried significant risks. Yet she also recognized the opportunity to secure their future against Winchester's machinations once and for all. What do you want to do? She asked simply. Griffin studied her face. You're not going to tell me to avoid the fight, to keep the peace for Samuel's sake. Olivia shifted their sleeping son to her other arm. Would that be keeping the peace, or merely postponing the inevitable? Winchester won't stop his campaign against us, Griffin. We can face him now with allies or later alone. A slow smile spread across Griffin's features. When did you become so wise, Olivia Rafferty? She returned his smile. I've always been wise. You're just now noticing. His laugh was soft as he leaned forward to press a kiss to her forehead, then another to Samuel's downy head. Then we'll join the cooperative, for our future. The winter of 1885-1886 proved exceptionally harsh, even by Nevada standards. Heavy snows isolated the ranch for weeks at a time, preventing trips to town for supplies or market days for Olivia's bakery. Yet within their snug cabin, expanded and insulated against the bitter cold, the little family found unexpected joy in their isolation. Griffin taught Olivia to play chess during the long evenings, their competitive matches often lasting until the fire burned low. Olivia read aloud from her collection of books, introducing Griffin to literature he'd never encountered during his practical education. Samuel grew stronger each day, his personality emerging in curious glances and determined wiggles as he learned to roll over and sit supported. Most nights, after Samuel was settled in his cradle, Griffin and Olivia retired to their separate rooms as they had since her arrival. But increasingly, Griffin found reasons to linger in her doorway, their conversations stretching into the night until propriety gave way to longing. On Christmas Eve, as a blizzard howled outside, Griffin presented Olivia with a small package wrapped in brown paper and string. It's not much, he apologized as she carefully unwrapped it, but I wanted you to have something that was truly yours. Inside lay a delicate silver locket on a fine chain. When Olivia opened it, she found a tiny portrait of Samuel on one side and Griffin on the other, expertly rendered in miniature. It's beautiful, she whispered, tears threatening. But how? When did you have these made? I asked Hannah to sketch us from memory, Griffin explained. She has quite a talent for portraiture. Then I sent the drawings to Carson City with a cattle buyer back in October. The jeweler there did the rest. The thoughtfulness of the gift overwhelmed Olivia. To know he'd been planning this for months, secretly arranging such a personal tribute to their family, it spoke volumes about his feelings. "Help me put it on," she requested, turning to offer him the clasp. Griffin's fingers were surprisingly deft as he secured the necklace. When he finished, his hands remained on her shoulders, warm and strong through the fabric of her dress. Olivia turned to face him, her hand rising to touch the locket resting against her collarbone. "I have something for you as well," she said softly, crossing to the small chest where she kept her few personal items. From it, she withdrew a carefully wrapped package. Griffin unwrapped it to reveal a hand-knitted scarf in rich blue wool, accompanied by matching gloves. "These are fine work," he said appreciatively, running his fingers over the intricate pattern. "There's more," Olivia prompted, gesturing to a folded paper tucked within the gift. Griffin opened it to find a legal document, carefully drafted in precise handwriting. His brow furrowed as he read, then his eyes widened in surprise. "This is a marriage certificate," he said, looking up at her in confusion. "A real one." Olivia nodded, suddenly nervous. "I asked Judge Peterson to prepare it when we were in Carson City last month," he said. Given the unusual circumstances, he could backdate it to when we claimed to have married. She twisted her hands anxiously. "I thought, if you truly wanted to make our arrangement real, we should have the proper documentation." Griffin stared at the paper for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, deliberately, he set it aside along with the scarf and gloves. "Griffin." Olivia's voice was uncertain. Had she presumed too much in answer, he crossed the space between them in 2 strides, gathering her into his arms with a tenderness that belied his strength. "Do you know what this means to me?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "That you would choose me, knowing everything." Olivia's hands came up to frame his face. "I chose you months ago, Griffin Rafferty. This just makes it official." Their lips met in a kiss unlike their previous tentative embraces, deep, certain, and filled with promises for the future. When they finally parted, breathless, Griffin rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me tonight," he whispered. "As my wife, my real wife." Olivia's answer was another kiss, sealing their commitment as the blizzard raged outside and their son slept peacefully in his cradle, secure in the knowledge that he was loved beyond measure. Spring arrived late but gloriously to Lovelock Valley, bringing with it new beginnings and old conflicts in equal measure. The water cooperative formalized its organization in March 1886, with 12 ranchers and 20 townspeople signing the founding documents. Griffin was elected to the governing council, a position that required weekly meetings in town and occasional trips to Carson City for legal consultations. Randall Winchester's response was swift and predictable. First came the economic pressure. Local businesses aligned with the Winchesters refused services to cooperative members. When that proved ineffective, Winchester resorted to legal maneuvers, filing injunctions and challenging water rights claims in county court. Through it all, Olivia maintained her successful market stall, now expanded to include Samuel's Corner, a small selection of handcrafted wooden toys that Griffin produced during winter evenings. The additional income proved crucial as legal fees mounted and sympathetic buyers for their cattle became scarcer. Samuel celebrated his first birthday in July with a small gathering of friends at the ranch. As she watched her son toddle unsteadily between Griffin and Hannah Cooper, Olivia marveled at the transformation of her life in just 18 months. From frightened, pregnant outcast to respected businesswoman and beloved wife, her journey seemed almost miraculous. Yet shadows lingered at the edges of their happiness. Verity, Winchester's hostility had intensified following her father's setbacks with the cooperative. Rumors reached Olivia of the woman's increasingly bitter comments about the Rafferty's marriage and Samuel's parentage. "Ignore her," Mary advised during one of their weekly teas. "Everyone who matters knows the truth of your family's devotion to each other." Olivia nodded, though concern nagged at her. "It's not just the gossip, Mary. Griffin says Randall Winchester has hired gunmen from Carson City. The cooperative leaders have received threatening notes." Mary's expression grew serious. "Jonathan mentioned something similar. He's worried about escalation now that the circuit judge has ruled in the cooperative's favor on the main water channel." The ruling had indeed been a significant victory, establishing that Winchester could not restrict access to the river that supplied most of the valley's water. But the smaller tributary streams, including the one running through the Rafferty property, remained contested. "Griffin tries to protect me from his concerns," Olivia confided, "but I see the worry in his eyes when he thinks I'm not looking." Mary reached across the table to squeeze her friend's hand. "These are difficult times for the valley, but remember, you and Griffin aren't facing them alone." That evening, after Samuel was asleep, Olivia found Griffin on the porch, staring at the stars with a troubled expression. "Bad news?" she asked, settling beside him on the bench he'd crafted the previous autumn. Griffin sighed, putting his arm around her shoulders. "Judge Coleman has recused himself from hearing our case about the eastern tributaries, claims a conflict of interest." "Is there one?" "Only that Winchester likely paid him off," Griffin replied grimly. "It means delays at minimum, maybe worse if they assign Judge Phillips from Elko County. He's known to favor mining and cattle interests over small ranchers." Olivia leaned into his embrace, drawing strength from his solid presence. "We'll face it together, whatever comes." Griffin pressed a kiss to her temple. "Yes, we will. Though sometimes I wonder if I've done right by you and Samuel, taking on this fight." "Don't," Olivia said firmly. "This fight found us, not the other way around, and it's worth fighting for, not just for us, but for everyone in the valley who deserves fair access to water." Griffin's arm tightened around her. "When did my frightened pregnant stranger become such a fierce defender of justice?" Olivia smiled up at him. "About the time a certain stubborn rancher showed me that standing up for what's right is worth the risk." Their moment of connection was interrupted by the distant sound of galloping hooves. Griffin was immediately alert, gently pushing Olivia toward the door. "Go inside and lock the door," he instructed, his hand moving to the rifle kept on pegs near the entrance. "Don't open it unless you hear my voice." Olivia hesitated, reluctant to leave him, but the thought of Samuel vulnerable inside spurred her to obey. From the window, she watched as Griffin positioned himself on the porch, rifle ready but not raised as the rider approached. Relief washed over her when she recognized Henry Mills from the general store, his horse lathered from hard riding. "Griffin," Henry called as he pulled his mount to a halt. "Thank God you're home." Griffin lowered his rifle. "What's happened, Henry?" Olivia opened the door, joining Griffin on the porch as Henry dismounted. "It's the Donovan place," Henry panted, accepting the dipper of water Olivia hastily fetched. "Winchester's men set fire to their barn tonight. Jonathan was inside, treating a horse. He's badly burned." Horror gripped Olivia. "Mary, is she all right?" "Shaken but unharmed," Henry assured her. "She's with Hannah now, but that's not all. Winchester's men are making the rounds of cooperative members. There's talk they're heading here next." Griffin's expression hardened. "How many?" "4, maybe 5 riders," Henry replied grimly. "Armed and liquored up from what I heard at the saloon." Griffin turned to Olivia, his decision clear in his eyes before he spoke. "Take Samuel to the root cellar. There are supplies there, and the entrance is hidden by the woodpile." "I'm not hiding while you face them alone," Olivia protested. Yes, you are, Griffin countered firmly. Samuel needs his mother safe. He softened his tone, touching her cheek gently. I'll come for you when it's over. The determination in his eyes convinced her. With quick movements, Olivia gathered the sleeping Samuel and essential supplies, following Griffin's instructions to the root cellar beneath the cabin's addition. The space was cramped but secure, stocked with emergency provisions and a small lantern. Stay quiet, no matter what you hear, Griffin instructed, pressing a quick, hard kiss to her lips before securing the trapdoor. In the dim lantern light, Olivia held Samuel close, whispering prayers as she strained to hear the events unfolding above. Minutes stretched into an hour as she heard the muffled sounds of men's voices, then a tense silence. When shots rang out, she bit her lip to keep from crying out, tasting blood as Samuel startled awake at the noise. More silence followed, stretching unbearably until a scraping sound at the trapdoor made her heart race. She pressed back against the earthen wall, one hand covering Samuel's mouth to quiet his whimpers. "Olivia," Griffin's voice, strained but alive, called softly. "It's safe now." Relief flooded her as the trapdoor opened, revealing Griffin's face, dirt-streaked but blessedly unharmed. He helped her up, immediately taking Samuel from her trembling arms. "What happened?" she asked, emerging into the cabin's main room to find Henry and two other men from town, the blacksmith, and Dr. Donovan's assistant, sitting at her table. "Winchester's men arrived as expected," Griffin explained, bouncing Samuel gently to soothe his fussing. "But so did our friends from town." The odds were suddenly less appealing to hired guns facing determined homeowners. "There was an exchange of gunfire," Henry added, "but no one was seriously hurt. One of Winchester's men took a bullet to the arm. They've retreated to town." "For now," the blacksmith, a burly man named Peterson, added grimly. "But they'll be back, likely with more men." Griffin nodded in agreement. "Which is why we need to end this tonight." Olivia looked sharply at her husband. "What are you planning?" Griffin handed Samuel to her, his expression resolute. "We're riding to the Winchester ranch. Not for violence," he added quickly, seeing her alarm. "For negotiation. With evidence." He nodded to Dr. Donovan's assistant, who produced a leather folio from his satchel. These are documents Jonathan Donovan had been gathering. Records of Winchester bribing officials, falsifying water rights claims, and now, witness statements about tonight's arson. "We're taking these directly to Winchester," Griffin continued. "With a proposal. He backs off the cooperative members and acknowledges our legal water rights, or these documents go to the federal marshal in Carson City." Olivia understood the risk in this plan, confronting a desperate, powerful man on his own territory. "Let me come with you," she said impulsively. The men exchanged surprised glances. "Absolutely not," Griffin replied. "It's too dangerous." "Winchester has a weakness," Olivia insisted. "His concern for public perception. Having a woman present, a mother, changes the dynamics of the confrontation. He can threaten men, but threatening a woman would cross a line even he might hesitate to breach." Griffin stared at her, clearly torn between admiration for her insight and fear for her safety. "She might be right," Henry acknowledged reluctantly. "Randall Winchester prides himself on being a gentleman. It's his daughter who lacks such restraints." After heated discussion, a compromise was reached. Olivia would accompany them, but Samuel would remain safely with Hannah Cooper in town. With the baby securely delivered to his temporary guardian, the small delegation set out for the Winchester estate under the cover of darkness. The Winchester ranch house loomed impressively against the starlit sky, its grand architecture a testament to generations of wealth and power. Lights still burned in the main rooms despite the late hour, suggesting their arrival was not unexpected. As they approached the main entrance, the door opened to reveal Randall Winchester himself, a tall, imposing figure in his 60s, with steel gray hair and cold eyes that assessed them with calculated interest. "Rafferty," he acknowledged with surprising civility. "You've brought quite the delegation, and Mrs. Rafferty too, I see. How unconventional." "This isn't a social call, Winchester," Griffin replied evenly. "We have business to discuss." Winchester gestured them inside with exaggerated courtesy. "By all means. I believe in addressing conflicts directly." The parlor they entered spoke of old wealth-heavy furniture, oil paintings, and crystal decanters filled with amber liquor. Verity Winchester sat near the fireplace, her sharp features hardened by malice as she observed their entrance. "Father, surely you're not entertaining these people," she objected, her gaze particularly venomous when it landed on Olivia. "Hush, Verity," Winchester commanded mildly. "Business before pleasure, or in this case business before the satisfaction of seeing troublemakers face consequences." He turned to Griffin. "I assume this is about tonight's unfortunate incident at the Donovan property." Griffin placed the leather folio on the table between them. "This is about much more than tonight, Winchester. It's about years of corruption, intimidation, and illegal water diversion." Winchester's eyebrow rose slightly as he examined the documents Griffin spread before him. "Interesting collection of, shall we call them interpretations? Nothing that would stand up in court, I assure you." "Perhaps not individually," Olivia interjected, drawing Winchester's surprised attention. "But collectively, with supporting testimony from county officials who have grown tired of living under threat, the federal authorities might take a different view." Winchester studied her with newfound respect. "You're more than the pretty face Verity described, Mrs. Rafferty. Or should I say, Miss Hayes?" "Yes," he added, noting her surprise. "I make it my business to know who opposes me, including unwed mothers masquerading as respectable wives." Griffin stepped forward menacingly, but Olivia placed a restraining hand on his arm. "My legal status is quite secure, Mr. Winchester," she replied calmly. "Unlike your water claims on the eastern tributaries." Winchester laughed suddenly, a genuine sound of amusement. "Well played, Mrs. Rafferty. I can see why this stubborn rancher values you." He sat back, steepling his fingers. "Let's dispense with the threats and counter-threats. What exactly do you propose?" For the next hour, a tense negotiation unfolded. Winchester, recognizing the potential damage the documents could cause, grudgingly agreed to recognize the cooperative's rights to fair water access. In exchange, the evidence of past misdeeds would remain private, a compromise that prioritized future peace over past justice. As dawn broke over the eastern mountains, a fragile agreement was reached. Winchester would withdraw his legal challenges to the cooperative, support the appointment of a neutral water commissioner, and cease hostilities against cooperative members. In return, the cooperative would grant certain historical water rights to Winchester lands and agree to a structured sharing system during drought years. "A fair compromise benefits everyone," Winchester concluded as the documents were signed. "Though I admit, it galls me to have been outmaneuvered by a collection of small ranchers and a determined young woman." His gaze lingered on Olivia, a mixture of grudging respect and calculation in his eyes. "You would have made a formidable ally, Mrs. Rafferty. A pity circumstances aligned you against my interests." "My loyalty is to justice and family, Mr. Winchester," Olivia replied steadily. "Had your methods been honorable, perhaps we would not have been adversaries." As they prepared to depart, Verity approached Olivia while the men gathered their papers. "This isn't over," she hissed, her voice low enough that only Olivia could hear. You may have won my father's respect, but I know what you are, an opportunist who trapped a grieving widower with another man's child." Olivia met her gaze unflinchingly. "You're wrong, Verity. About Griffin, about me, about what constitutes a family. That's why you've lost him, not to me, but to your own inability to see beyond possession and control to genuine love." Verity's face contorted with rage, but before she could respond, Griffin appeared at Olivia's side, his presence a silent warning. "It's time to go home," he said simply, offering Olivia his arm. As they rode away from the Winchester estate, exhaustion and relief mingled with the first golden rays of sunlight. The battle wasn't entirely over. Implementing the agreement would require vigilance, and personal animosities wouldn't fade overnight. But a major hurdle had been cleared, opening the path to a more secure future. Griffin reached across the space between their horses, taking Olivia's hand in his. "You were magnificent," he said quietly. "I've never been prouder to call you my wife." Olivia's heart swelled at his words. "We did this together, all of us." "Yes," Griffin agreed, "but it was your courage that inspired mine. From that first day on our porch, you've shown more strength than anyone I've ever known." As they approached town to collect Samuel, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from frightened outcast to respected community member, from desperate stranger to beloved wife. The road had been difficult, marked by prejudice, threat, and uncertainty. Yet she wouldn't change a moment of it, for it had led to this: a true family, a genuine home, and a love deeper than she had ever imagined possible. 5 years later, summer 1891, the sound of children's laughter floated through the open windows of the expanded Rafferty ranch house, as Olivia put the finishing touches on a birthday cake. Samuel, now a sturdy 6-year-old with his mother's blue eyes and his adoptive father's determined chin, was chasing his 3-year-old sister Emma through the front yard while their father pretended to be a fearsome bear in pursuit. "Mama, look!" Emma shrieked with delight as Griffin scooped her into the air, her copper curls identical to Olivia's streaming behind her like a banner. "I see you, sweet pea," Olivia called back, smiling at the tableau her family created against the backdrop of the prosperous ranch. The years following the Winchester Agreement had brought significant changes to Lovelock Valley. The water cooperative had flourished, bringing stability to the region's agriculture. Griffin's leadership role had evolved into a position on the county commission, where his practical wisdom and fair-mindedness earned respect even from former adversaries. Olivia's bakery business had grown from a market stall to a proper shop in town, managed 3 days a week by a local girl, while Olivia balanced motherhood with her entrepreneurial ambitions. Her reputation for both business acumen and community service had silenced even the most persistent rumors about her past. The Rafferty Ranch itself had expanded, with additional grazing lands purchased from neighboring properties and modern improvements financed by their combined success. The modest cabin where Olivia had first sought refuge was now the heart of a comfortable home, expanded room by room as their family grew. A knock at the door interrupted Olivia's preparations. Opening it, she found Mary Donovan and Hannah Cooper bearing gifts and food for the celebration. "We're not too early, are we?" Mary asked, embracing Olivia warmly. "Jonathan insisted we bring fresh ice from town for the lemonade." "Perfect timing," Olivia assured them, accepting their offerings. "Griffin's entertaining the children while I finish up here." As they arranged food on the long table Griffin had crafted for family gatherings, Hannah updated Olivia on town news, the new schoolhouse construction, plans for the Harvest Festival, and the latest development in Verity Winchester's life. "She's finally accepted Albert Prescott's proposal," Hannah reported. "The wedding's set for October." "That's welcome news," Olivia commented sincerely. "Perhaps marriage will bring her happiness." Since the confrontation at the Winchester estate, Verity had maintained a cold distance from the Raffertys, though her active hostility had gradually diminished. Her father, surprisingly, had developed a grudging respect for Griffin's integrity, occasionally consulting him on regional matters despite their past conflicts. "Speaking of happiness," Mary interjected with a knowing smile, "how are you feeling these days? Any improvement in the morning sickness?" Olivia's hand instinctively moved to her still flat stomach. At 4 months along, her third pregnancy remained their private joy, though Mary had guessed immediately during Olivia's recent checkup. "Much better this week," Olivia admitted, "though I haven't told the children yet. Samuel is so observant I want to wait until we're ready for the barrage of questions." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of more guests, neighboring ranchers and their families, townspeople who had stood with them during difficult times, even Judge Peterson from Carson City, whose fair rulings had helped solidify the water cooperative's legal standing. As the yard filled with friends, Olivia observed Griffin moving among them, confidently greeting each arrival while keeping a watchful eye on their children. The transformation in him over these years moved her deeply from the solitary, grief-haunted man who had taken in a desperate stranger to this open-hearted father and husband, secure in his place within family and community. When the time came for the birthday celebration, Griffin called for everyone's attention, standing tall beside Samuel with a hand on the boy's shoulder. "I want to thank you all for coming to celebrate our son's 6th birthday," he began, his deep voice carrying across the gathering. "6 years ago, our lives changed forever with Samuel's arrival. He was the beginning of everything good that's followed." Olivia felt tears prick her eyes as Griffin continued, "Some of you know parts of our family's story. How Olivia came to this ranch, brave but frightened, carrying this boy beneath her heart. How I said to her, 'Your baby is my baby,' not knowing then how completely that child would become mine in every way that matters." Samuel looked up at Griffin with adoration, unaware of the unusual circumstances of his birth, knowing only the security of his father's unwavering love. Today we celebrate not just Samuel's birth, but the family that grew from that day, a family formed not by blood alone, but by choice, by commitment, and by love that deepens with each passing year. Griffin's eyes found Olivia's across the gathering, the tenderness in his gaze making her heart swell. They had agreed that today would be the day to share their news with everyone. "And speaking of growing," Griffin continued with a smile, "Olivia and I are pleased to announce that our family will expand again this winter. Samuel and Emma will welcome a new brother or sister around Christmas." Cheers and congratulations erupted from the guests as Emma bounced excitedly, and Samuel puffed up with big brother importance. Griffin crossed to Olivia, taking her hand and drawing her to his side as friends surrounded them with good wishes. Later, as twilight painted the mountains in purple and gold, the celebration continued around a bonfire in the yard. Samuel had fallen asleep against his father's chest, exhausted from excitement and play. Emma was nestled in Olivia's lap, fighting sleep as she listened to the adults' conversation. "I never imagined this," Griffin said softly to Olivia, gesturing to the scene around them, friends lingering over coffee and cake, children playing tag in the fading light, the prosperous ranch stretching in all directions. "When you arrived that day, I thought I was offering temporary shelter to a woman in need I never expected. A family," Olivia finished for him, her free hand finding his. "A second chance," Griffin corrected gently. at love, at fatherhood, at belonging to something larger than myself. Olivia leaned against his shoulder, contentment flowing through her as she watched the firelight dance across the faces of their children. You ever regret it? Taking in a pregnant stranger, facing Winchester's hostility, enduring the town gossip? Griffin's arm tightened around her shoulders. Not for a single moment. Every challenge we've faced, we've overcome together. And look what we've built. Indeed, as Olivia surveyed their home and land, the thriving community around them, and most importantly, the family they had forged from unlikely beginnings, she felt profound gratitude for the journey that had brought them here. From the moment you said your baby is my baby, you gave us both a future, Olivia said softly. You couldn't have known then how completely I would become yours, or how thoroughly you would become mine. Griffin pressed a kiss to her temple, his voice husky with emotion. I may not have known it then, but I know it now. And I'll spend the rest of my life being thankful for the day you found your way to my door. As stars appeared in the darkening sky, the Rafferty family remained by the fire, surrounded by friends and wrapped in the warmth of a love that had grown from compassion into something enduring and true, a love that had transformed a simple act of kindness into a lifetime of joy.